Garden centers sell solutions to every problem, including sprays, powders, gadgets, and fertilizers. Your grandmother solved the same problems with things she already had. She used kitchen scraps, fireplace ash, old newspapers, and common sense. Here are 15 garden problems she fixed without ever opening her wallet. Number 1. Slugs eating seedlings can wipe out a young garden almost overnight. Your grandmother faced this crisis every spring, but she never reached for pellets or powders. Instead, she set out beer traps, just a shallow dish sunk into the soil and filled with the cheapest lager or homebrew on hand. Slugs cannot resist the yeasty scent. They crawl in and drown. Each trap can catch 5 or 6 slugs in just a few days. For a barrier that costs nothing, she would sprinkle a ring of dry wood ash from the fireplace around her seedlings. The fine ash irritates slugs and keeps them at bay, but only as long as it stays dry. After rain, it needs to be refreshed. And when the problem was worst, she would go out at dusk or after a light rain with a flashlight, picking slugs by hand and dropping them in soapy water. Nightly hand-picking can remove up to 90% of visible slugs. No chemicals, no gadgets, just a watchful eye, a few household scraps, and a steady routine. That is how she protected her seedlings and got a head start on a healthy garden, all without spending a dime. In second place, aphids can swarm onto tender shoots and leaves almost overnight, draining sap and stunting growth across the whole garden. Your grandmother did not reach for chemical sprays. She reached for her kitchen soap and a clove of garlic. She would dissolve a teaspoon of plain dish soap in a quart of water, crush in a garlic clove, and shake it all together. Spraying this mixture at dusk, when pollinators are safe and the sun will not scorch leaves, knocks down nearly 90% of aphids by suffocating them. But she did not stop there. Along the fence line or at the back of her plot, she left a wild strip of tall grass, wildflowers, and a few weeds. This unruly edge tripled the number of ladybugs and lacewings, nature's own aphid hunters, bringing lasting balance without a single purchase. The key is a gentle soap ratio, no more than 1 part soap to 10 parts water, to avoid leaf burn. With these habits, she kept aphids in check, protected the good bugs, and proved that a watchful eye and a bit of household know-how go further than any bottle from the store. Third on our list, poor soil that won't grow anything can leave a garden stuck before it even starts. Your grandmother didn't see lifeless dirt as a lost cause, she saw it as a blank canvas. Instead of buying bags of fertilizer, she built fertility from scratch with what was already on hand. All year she saved kitchen scraps, vegetable peels, coffee grounds, even eggshells, and buried them right into shallow trenches between rows, about 8 inches deep. That depth keeps pests and digging animals away, and it lets worms and microbes turn scraps into rich humus. Each spring and fall she would rake fallen leaves into a pile, leaving them to break down for at least 6 months. Then spread that leaf mold as a blanket over her beds. These simple habits, trench composting and leaf piles, boosted the soil's ability to hold water and nutrients, raising yields by as much as 30% over time. With every season, her soil grew darker, looser, and more alive. The secret was not a product, but a cycle. Nothing wasted, everything returned. That's how she turned poor ground into a garden that could feed a family, all without spending a single dime. Number 4. Weeds can overrun even the most careful garden, stealing water and nutrients before your vegetables get a chance. Your grandmother faced a sea of dandelions and crabgrass every spring, but she never turned to plastic mulch or weed killers. Instead, she saved her newspapers all winter. Then she laid them down in the garden 4 to 6 sheets thick, right up to the stems of her crops. This simple barrier blocks sunlight, smothering 95% of weeds before they break through. For stubborn patches, she would pour boiling water directly onto the offenders. No fancy torch needed, just a kettle. The heat kills shallow roots instantly, but it is important to keep the stream away from plants you want to keep, since boiling water does not discriminate. She always made a rule to pull weeds before they set seed, never after. That habit alone kept the problem from multiplying year after year. With just a stack of old newspapers, a kettle, and a sharp eye, she kept her rows clear and her soil moist, all without spending a dime. That's how she managed competition, by outsmarting weeds, not outspending them. Number 5. Wilting plants. In the summer, heat can leave a garden gasping by midday, no matter how much you water. Your grandmother didn't stand out there every evening with a hose. She trained her plants to fend for themselves. Once a week, she gave her vegetables a deep soak, enough to push moisture down past the top roots and encourage them to reach twice as deep for water. Right after watering, she spread a thick layer, about 3 inches, of wood chips or bark mulch over the soil. This simple habit cut evaporation by up to 70%, keeping the ground cool and moist even on the hottest days. For extra water in dry spells, she reused kitchen gray water, but only if it was salt-free and from mild soaps. Harsh detergents or salty water can damage plants over time. With these steps, her garden stayed green and resilient, even when the sun beat down. No gadgets, no store-bought solutions, just deep watering, free mulch, and a careful eye on what the plants truly needed. Number 6. Late frost can devastate a garden just as seedlings begin to thrive. Your grandmother knew that a single cold night could wipe out weeks of careful planting, so she turned to what was already in the house. As dusk fell and the forecast threatened, she would drape old bed sheets over rows of tomatoes and peppers, pinning them down with rocks or clothespins. This simple cover traps enough warmth to keep the air around the plants 5 to 10 degrees higher than the open sky. A difference that means survival when temperatures dip just below freezing. For the youngest seedlings, she would place glass jars upside down to act as mini greenhouses, catching the day's heat and holding it through the night. Along the row ends, she would set out water jugs filled during the day. As the water cools, it slowly releases heat, buffering the chill. During the infamous 1977 frost, gardeners who used these methods saved 70% of their tomato crop, while commercial fields lost nearly everything. The key is to remove covers as soon as the sun rises, because trapped moisture can cause mold if left too long. With a few household scraps and a sharp eye on the weather, she turned a crisis into just another morning in the garden, proving that protection does not have to cost a cent. Number 7. Rabbits can wipe out a bed of young greens in a single night, leaving nothing but nibbled stems behind. Your grandmother never relied on expensive repellents or traps. Instead, she gathered hair from hairbrushes and barbershops, scattering it in thick rings around her tender plants. The human scent in the hair signals danger to rabbits, driving them away. Studies show this simple trick can cut rabbit browsing by up to 70%. As long as the hair is refreshed weekly. For extra protection, she would form collars from scrap chicken wire about 30 centimeters high and place them around the most vulnerable transplants. These collars block rabbits from reaching the stems until the plants are sturdy enough to survive a few bites. For larger patches, she would hang empty tin cans from string along the garden's edge. The slightest breeze sets them rattling, startling rabbits and keeping them on the move. With nothing but hair clippings, salvaged wire, and a few old cans, she built a layered defense. No cruelty, no cost, just careful observation and a habit of using what was already at hand. In 8th place, deer can undo months of careful planting in a single night, stripping beans, tomatoes, and fruit trees down to bare stems. Your grandmother never bought sprays or fancy gadgets. Instead, she strung fishing line at about 80 centimeters high, just above a deer's nose, around her garden. The line is nearly invisible, and when a deer walks into it, the sudden touch startles them, sending them off before they get a chance to browse. For extra insurance, she tied bright UV reflective ribbons or strips of old plastic along the line. Even in low light, these flutter and catch a deer's eye, making the whole area seem unpredictable and unsafe. If she had thorny prunings from the hedge or rosebush, she piled them along the garden's edge, giving deer one more reason to turn back. To keep these tactics working, she rotated the placement every few weeks, because deer are quick learners, and a new pattern keeps them guessing. And she always made sure the trip lines were flagged where people might walk, so neighbors and grandchildren did not get caught up. With nothing but salvaged string, old ribbon, and a watchful routine, she protected her crops from the biggest thieves in the garden. No dollars spent, just a bit of cleverness and care. Number 9. When there was no money for seed starting pots, your grandmother never let that slow her down. She'd gather up empty toilet paper rolls, cut them in half, and stand them upright in a shallow tray. Each roll became a perfect little cell for a seed, holding just enough soil and moisture to get things started. For tiny seeds, she'd use the compartments of an old egg carton, each one a ready-made home for lettuce, basil, or flowers. Even citrus peels, scooped out after breakfast, made sturdy little cups that could be planted right into the garden, peel and all. These homemade pots break down quickly in the soil, letting roots push through without any transplant shock. University trials show that seedlings raised in biodegradable cells like these have nearly 100% germination for small seeded crops, and cardboard rolls decompose within weeks. With these tricks, she turned household scraps into a nursery of new life, proving you don't need to spend a cent to start a whole garden from seed. A no-cost way to begin. Number 10. Powdery mildew on squash can turn healthy leaves into a patchwork of white fuzz almost overnight, slowing growth and spoiling the harvest. Your grandmother never reached for fungicides or fancy sprays. Instead, she mixed a simple solution, 1 part milk to 9 parts water, and poured it into a spray bottle. Each week, as soon as the first powdery spots appeared, she would mist the tops and undersides of the leaves until they glistened. The proteins in milk disrupt the fungus, stopping it from spreading. University trials show this method controls up to 85% of mildew cases, without harming bees or the plants themselves. She paired this with a sharp pair of scissors, snipping away the worst infected leaves and tossing them in the trash, not the compost. Every spring she would thin crowded vines, letting air move freely so dampness could not linger. The key is consistency, a weekly spray, a watchful eye, and a bit of old-fashioned patience. With nothing more than a splash of milk and a steady routine, she kept her squash plants healthy, proving that fungal diseases do not need to be a death sentence or a reason to spend a dime. Number 11. Blossom end rot can ruin a tomato harvest just as the fruit starts to ripen. Your grandmother knew this brown, sunken patch at the blossom end isn't a disease. It's a sign the plant can't get enough calcium right when it matters most. But instead of buying lime or special sprays, she used what the kitchen gave her: eggy shells. She would rinse and dry the shells, then grind them as fine as flour with a rolling pin or a coffee grinder. This powder went straight into the planting hole or was sprinkled around the base. Finely ground eggshells break down in 1 to 3 months, slowly releasing calcium as roots need it. For an extra boost, she sometimes steeped crushed shells in lemon juice or leftover tea for a week, making a quick-release solution to water in at the roots. Still, she knew calcium alone would not fix the problem if the soil dried out. That is why she buried an old clay flower pot, an olla next to her tomatoes, filling it with water every few days. The unglazed pot let moisture seep out slowly, keeping the soil evenly damp so calcium could travel up to the fruit. This combination, steady moisture and a steady trickle of calcium, kept her tomatoes firm, healthy, and free of rot. She did not need fancy products, just a habit of saving scraps and watching the weather. That is how she turned kitchen waste into harvest insurance, proving that careful attention and a little resourcefulness can outsmart even the trickiest garden problems. Number 12. Cutworms can wipe out a row of seedlings in a single night, slicing through stems at ground level before you even know there's a problem. Your grandmother never lost sleep over these silent attackers. She would reach for a bit of scrap cardboard and cut it into collars about 10 centimeters tall, then sink each one 2 centimeters deep around the base of every new plant. This simple barrier blocks cutworms from circling the stem, forcing them to move on. Extension studies show that this method prevents up to 95% of cutworm damage, making it one of the most reliable free defenses available. The cardboard breaks down naturally over time, but she always removed the collars once the stems toughened, so nothing was wasted and young plants could grow freely. With just a few minutes' work and materials already on hand, she protected her crops from sudden losses. No sprays, no traps, just a keen eye and a habit of turning scraps into shields. Number 13. Birds swooping down to snatch seeds and nibble tender seedlings can undo days of careful planting in a matter of minutes. Your grandmother watched for the flash of wings each spring, but she never let her harvest become easy pickings. Instead, she reached for what was already at hand: a stack of old pie tins, some string, and a bit of ingenuity. She'd hang the tins from stakes or branches, spacing them along the rows so that every breeze sent them spinning and flashing in the sun. The unpredictable movement and bright reflections startled birds, reducing losses by as much as 80% in university trials. For extra stubborn flocks, she'd stretch a length of lightweight curtain netting over her seedlings, making sure it was pulled taut and pinned down at the edges. This simple barrier kept birds out without trapping them, as long as it stayed snug against the ground. And she never left her defenses in the same place for long. Every week she rotated the spinners and shifted the netting, knowing that birds learn patterns quickly. With nothing but kitchen scraps and a watchful routine, she protected each emerging row, proving that a little motion and reflection can outsmart even the cleverest garden thieves. Number 14. A short growing season can leave warm, loving crops like tomatoes and peppers struggling to ripen before the first frost. Your grandmother did not let a cool spring or early autumn cut her harvest short. She salvaged old windows and built simple cold frames, just a wooden box with a glass lid, angled to face south. This setup acts like a mini greenhouse, capturing the sun's warmth and raising soil temperatures by up to 5 degrees Celsius. By placing these frames against a south-facing wall, she created a pocket of warmth that could add the equivalent of one hardiness zone, gaining 4 to 6 extra weeks of productive growing time. For an early start, she would line up seed trays on sunny windowsills indoors, then move them to the cold frame once nights warmed above 10 degrees Celsius. Each morning, she would prop open the lid to vent excess heat, closing it again before dusk. The secret was in the details: hinges for easy opening, a sloped orientation for maximum sun, and daily attention to temperature swings. With nothing more than scrap wood, a pane of glass, and a sharp eye on the forecast, she stretched the season and brought in a full harvest, all without spending a dime. Number 15. Reading the soil without a test kit was second nature to your grandmother. She relied on simple kitchen chemistry and a sharp eye. A splash of vinegar on a soil scoop, if it fizzed, meant the ground was alkaline rather than acidic. For the opposite, she would dampen a pinch of soil and sprinkle on baking soda, and a fizz meant the soil was too acidic. These homemade tests, while not as precise as a lab, gave her a ballpark idea, usually within 1 pH unit, enough to guide what to plant where. She also watched the weeds. Dandelions signaled low calcium, while plantain thrived in compacted spots. By noticing which plants struggled and which thrived, she could adjust with what she had, using wood ash for acidic patches and leaf mold for poor ground. No gadgets, no spending, just learning to read the garden like a book. The real secret wasn't a product, but the power of careful observation and trust in what the land was telling her. Across all 15 garden fixes, one pattern stands out. Resourcefulness turns household scraps and observation into real solutions. You don't need a shopping list. You need curiosity, patience, and a willingness to try what's already at hand. That's the real legacy of past generations. Nothing wasted, everything learned. The best tool in your garden is the knowledge passed down. Which method will you try first? Let us know in the comments.